breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my co-host, Dr. Glenn Harrison. What's up, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are things so far?
Doing good. Yeah, doing good.
Yeah.
I'm excited to do this podcast today because I have certain friends that won't be named Alex that this will definitely be applicable to. And I've heard him talk about it many times over the years. So next time I hear him whine about it, I'm just going to forward him this podcast.
There we go. That's a very passive aggressive way of approaching it, right?
Yeah, I like to just like slowly drill it into their brains.
Slide it over to them.
Slide it in. Into their direct messages, be like, hey, I heard you have some Hpylori and I'm going to send this to you.
Mm-hmm.
So today we are talking about Hpylori. Hpylori is a bacteria actually that affects the pH within your stomach and can cause a variety of symptoms, which we'll cover in just a little bit. If this is your first time watching or listening and you find value out of this content, please hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications because we're going to continue to roll out new information each and every week. So without further ado, this week we're talking about Hpylori.
That's right. So Hpylori, it's a bacterial infection. It affects the stomach. Many people, if they're listening to this, they've already heard of it, been diagnosed with it, have a friend with it, something. And but why is it really so important? Well, I think the easiest thing to say, or one of the easiest things is it's like many of the disorders we talk about, it really opens up the door for a whole host of other problems. But we're always concerned about H. pylori, but oh my goodness, it is an indicator of dysfunction in the body that allows it. But once you're a host to this bacterial infection, it creates a lot of problems. So I'll let you jump into maybe other reasons why it's important, or when it was discovered, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that interested me as well. I didn't know that in medical terms, it's relatively recently. So it was discovered in 1982. And they actually determined that one of the leading causes of peptic ulcers was from H. pylori. Mm-hmm. And what happens with H. pylori is H. pylori actually shuts off your parietal cells, and your parietal cells in your stomach are responsible for producing hydrochloric acid. And what the hydrochloric acid does is it helps you break down proteins. It helps you start the digestive process. So when you don't have enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, then you get issues like fermentation,
bloating,
bloating, all this kind of stuff. It can actually cause malnutrition because you're not breaking down and absorbing your nutrients. You can get acid reflux because the fermentation of the foods in your stomach causes that gastric juice to wash back up into your esophagus. It's kind of a big deal, can be really debilitating, can impact you for a long, long time, especially if you're not proactive and consistent about helping manage it.
That's right. And I've had patients call where they have an H. pylori infection, they've been diagnosed, and then what happens are reoccurring infections. That's the biggest thing. It gets knocked out, but the environment stays the same. They're vulnerable, and then it happens again, and then then there are medications, and then it happens again and again and again and again. You often wonder, was it ever really knocked out, or are they just the perfect environment to allow this bacterial infection? Mm-hmm. So that's maybe why it's important. I think another thing is it's everywhere. H. pylori is everywhere. You'll find it in water and food, and your dog licking your face. That is another thing that the dogs have a lot of H. pylori, but it usually doesn't hold ground, and they don't have problems with it because their stomachs are so acidic, which is one of the defense mechanisms for H. pylori. So now we get into all this, but what are some of the symptoms? Some of the common symptoms of H. pylori infections?
Yeah, so heartburn, bloating, indigestion, nutrient deficiencies, ulcers. If you're getting 1, 2, or all of these, then you definitely need to be tested. You can get pain after eating foods, especially foods that are like more acidic, or things like coffee or citrus, tomatoes. I know a lot of people with H. pylori suffer like if they ingest any alcohol. So it really can impact, you're not only looking at the nutritional deficiencies because they're not breaking down and absorbing things, but also because they're starting to eliminate those things that trigger any sort of symptom from their diet.
That's right. And the mechanism of this H. pylori, briefly, because I know we could talk about it forever, but just to try to give people a visual, I always think of this little bacteria, this little bug, and he or she has a drill on the inside of your stomach, and the stomach is filled with all of this. You have the tissue, but then on the inside of the tissue, there's this beautiful coating of mucus. And I say beautiful because it saves you. Your stomach acid is so acidic that it'll actually burn your tissue if you put it on your finger. But the stomach is engineered properly that there's this thick barrier, this mucus barrier. And you should have ample stomach acid, which kills these H. pylori. Many reasons of stomach acid getting low, and you can't kill this bacteria. This bacteria bonds to the side of the stomach lining, but because the acid levels are low in the stomach, this is one of the major cause of H. pylori infections. Stomach acid gets low. Your body doesn't invest as much in the mucus barrier because there's less stomach acid, so it doesn't need to make as thick of a barrier. When your mucus barrier becomes thinner, that's when H. pylori has the opportunity to, I can use my little drill and get through the mucus barrier because the mucus barrier is thinner now, and there's no acid to kill me. So what a great place to go through and start adhesing, drilling into the inner wall of the stomach. Once it does that, it deteriorates the mucus barrier. This H. pylori, it pees urase. I think it's urase. It's an enzyme shutting off the acid-producing cells of the stomach, further making the environment favorable for its existence, so it can welcome its friends down too. It can be ingested, and then you have more and more bacterial infections, more severe H. pylori infections drilling into the wall. Now you have this exposed ulcer, irritation on the inside of your stomach lining, if you will. And that exposed area is very sensitive to, and that's where you talked about acidic foods, you talked about citrus and coffee and tomato paste and alcohol. All of these things are very irritating to this injury, and then you end up with this massive symptom. So the symptom isn't from the food, it's from the ulceration, which is from the H. pylori that had the opportunity to make it home. Hopefully that summarized, made a visual of it.
Basically, It breaks down the insulator. Like when you have less stomach acid, it breaks down the insulation. When the insulation is thin enough, then basically they can shut off the thing that's killing it.
That's right.
And then they just explode, and then there's a lot more.
So that's kind of a good way to opening up the conversation to H. pylori isn't the original problem.
Right.
It's a final product of other problems, most commonly low stomach acid, which not necessarily we can get too far into that.
Did we ever tell them what H. pylori actually stands for?
Shoot for it.
Yeah, it's Helicobacter pylori. So
there we go. Good enough.
Thought about it. I was like, I'm just assuming everyone knows what H. pylori is, but it's just a specific type of bacterial infection.
That's right. Yeah, and discovered not that long ago.
Yeah, not that long ago.
Yeah, early 80s.
Obviously, there's some things that we do normally that we don't really think about that can lower our stomach pH, which kind of, if you think about it, is counterproductive, especially in regards to an H. pylori infection. Things like antacid, like Tums, Pepcid AC, whatever you're doing. If you have an infection, high acidic foods are going to be the things that irritate, like as the mucosal lining deteriorates and degenerates, and your stomach, basically, the actual stomach tissue becomes more exposed, you're going to be more susceptible to pain from that type of stuff. Any sort of autoimmune condition, because you can actually develop an autoimmune disease where you actually develop antibodies to your parietal cells and to intrinsic factor, which we won't go that far. If you have questions about autoimmune, we have a podcast on that.
Exactly. It's just where your immune system starts destroying your acid producing cells. Yep. And then that's one mechanism of your acid levels in your stomach coming down, setting up a welcoming environment for this little man with a drill called H. pylori.
You got it. So, if you have a lot of person-to-person contact, because it can come from a variety of sources. So
dogs
if you're out there
licking your face,
dogs licking your face, some other person that you met somewhere licking your face, or
contaminated foods, water. So, H. pylori is kind of everywhere, and
it really is everywhere. You shouldn't get it though, unless you have
that's right
perfect environment within your stomach.
That's right. You're the perfect environment to allow it. So this acid in our stomach is just a defense mechanism, and anything that suppresses this acid sets up an environment for it. So as I mentioned, patient calling, had a few of them talking about reoccurring infections. Without a doubt, this individual has a perfect environment in the stomach to allow that the bacteria to keep recolonizing. They're not killing it off like they should be.
Right.
So then naturally, this takes us to strategies. Well, these individuals, they were only on antibiotics, so they kill it. Works very good, but if the antibiotics aren't going to help restore stomach acid to help build a mucus barrier and all of these defenses in the stomach, so then you're just an environment to allow it again and allow it again.
It's like you're removing, it's like you're kicking someone out of the house, but then you're leaving the front door open.
Like that. So the little man can come in with the drill and go through your thin insulation.
Yeah. So that's obviously like the traditional approach to it. Some alternatives. You need to make sure that you maintain proper stomach acid. Mm-hmm. There's supplements that can help you raise your pH of your stomach acid. There's digestive enzymes, but then there's also things that you can do that actually increase your mucosal layer, which make it basically more slippery, kind of is a good way of talking about it. Which
thickening your insulation up so the drill can't get through.
You got it. Thickens the insulation, makes it more slippery so nothing can bind to it, right? Mm-hmm. Things like berberry, or golden seal, oregano. What else do we got here? Chinese golden thread.
Yeah. Grape extract. Yerba mansa extract. So these are all just herbs that will help. They act as natural antimicrobials, and they help build up the mucus barrier of the stomach. And then anything, this is beyond what we were talking about, but anything to enhance stomach acid. So if someone has acid reflux, heartburn, indigestion, I wrote an article on this. I'll put it in the description of this video. If anybody has heartburn or acid reflux, that's an indicator of low stomach acid. So if they have these symptoms, that's an indicator of low stomach acid almost always, which is a good early warning sign that you could be susceptible to H. pylori. And I wrote a big article on all of this, and there's a video in it, and I'll put it in the bottom. So this is just a risk factor to developing H. pylori. So there's a tangled web. Hopefully people can appreciate that you have to work your way out and keep going upstream. Otherwise, you'll be living on antibiotics. You'll be dealing with pain. You'll be living on antacids, and you'll never actually heal up properly.
Right.
And there's dietary efforts as well, of course. Acid, high acid, diets, so sugar and processed foods. These diets, standard American diets, they actually help suppress stomach acid. So you add more acidic foods, your acid producing cells downregulate because they're like, wow, we have enough acid, but it's the wrong kind of acid. So it downregulates the hydrochloric acid in your stomach. That's one of your defense mechanisms. So, that's kind of, if there's a dietary effort, that's it. But I can't stress enough, have somebody to navigate through this with you. Just today, I had a colleague of mine reached out to me, and she asked me, she said, I have a friend with heartburn, really bad heartburn. What should she do? I'm like, whoa, there's a million things that can cause heartburn. I wrote in this article, and there's an associated video with it. So I just sent the link to it because I was like, okay, go down it. And there's so many different avenues to go down. It'd probably be overwhelming. So just make sure you have a provider that's going to look at the whole story, not just throw out a supplement or just throw a medication at you, but is actually going to help get to the underlying causes of it, so it doesn't lead to H. pylori and many more advanced disorders.
You got it. Mm-hmm. So again, if this is your first time watching or listening and you got value out of this content, please hit like and subscribe. Turn on notifications, share it with your family, friends, or loved ones. If you'd like to get in contact with us, we have an email for the podcast. It's info@brainstormingwiththedocs.com. If you want to get on our websites are northlakescheropractic.com and drgharrison.com. Reach out to us, give us ideas, topics, things you might want to hear us talk about, and we'll do our best to do so. So
right,
we'll keep rolling them out each and every week.
All right. Sounds good, Dr. Kolby. I look forward to talking to you in the next one.
Sounds good, bud. All right. Bye bye.